In this section, we're going to talk about multiplicity. So here's the word. And maybe you know what multiplicity is. Maybe you have not heard of that before. But it has to do with how many times the factor is appearing in the polynomial. Okay? Now, it's not really the factor, but rather the zero. Okay? So that's, that's what we're talking about. Let's look at this function they give us. They give us a factor of x plus 3, right? Okay, so the 0, so I'm going to come down here and I'm going to write the zeros. One of them is negative 3, okay? Then when I look at this factor, I have the factor is x minus 2. That means the 0 is 2. But notice that it's there 2 times. Like you have x minus 2 times x minus 2. That's when the multiplicity comes in. So multiplicity, the multiplicity for 2 in this case is 2. Why? Because that's how many times that factor appears in the polynomial. So it goes by that exponent. What do you think the multiplicity is here for the negative 3? Well, it only appears once. So it has a multiplicity of 1. Okay? So think about that. Rewind it if you need to. Okay, so we've got one more factor that we see. Here's the factor, x plus 1. And so I get a 0 of negative 1. But what's the multiplicity? Well, that factor is in there 3 times. So the multiplicity is 3. Okay? All right. So it gets a little tricky with the wording, but I'm going to talk about something else first. Okay, so let's look at the multiplicities here. Notice that you have, oh, I thought this graph went with, oh, it does. Okay, so notice that I have a 0, let's see, a 0 at negative 3. Okay, so let's see it on the graph. It's right there. There's my 0 at negative 3. The multiplicity is 1. Notice that it's just like crossing right through there. It's just like going straight through. It could go at an angle, okay? But it's kind of like almost linear in that portion, okay? So when the multiplicity is 1, it's going to kind of go straight through, Could go that way, could go this way, okay? But it's going to do something like that. When we have another 0 at 2, so that's over here. Notice that the graph is coming down. It's coming down, and it's like bouncing off the x-axis. I like the term bounce, but sometimes they'll say touch. So when that happens, if it's 2, it's going to touch. And actually, if it's any even multiplicity, it's going to touch. Okay? Now, so if the multiplicity is even, it's going to touch or bounce. If it's a 4 or a 6, it doesn't matter. It's going to come down and it's going to bounce off. Or it could be coming up and bouncing that way, okay? But it's going to bounce off the x-axis. Okay? So that's if the multiplicity is even. Okay, then we have one more. We have the multiplicity being 3 at negative 1. Okay, so where's the negative 1? Right here. Notice that the graph is not quite like it was at a multiplicity of 1, and it's not bouncing or touching. It's coming up, and then it's kind of curving. It's like that snake portion, like in an x cubic or in a cubic function. Okay, so if the multiplicity is odd and it's greater than 1, it's going to come up and do kind of this type of thing. Or it could be going the other way, something like that. Okay. We say that it crosses. The only difference between this multiplicity of 1 and the multiplicity that's a higher odd number is the multiplicity at 1 kind of goes straight on through. It doesn't have that little curvy part going on, okay? But both of them cross. So sometimes they'll say touch or cross. They'll say if multiplicity is odd, it's going to cross. It'll cross at that 0, okay? And then there's a distinction between if it's a multiplicity of 1, it's going to go straight on through. If it's an odd number higher than that, it's going to kind of snake its way through. If the multiplicity is even, it's going to touch or bounce, whichever way you want to think of it, okay? Now, I know this is a lot of information. There's lots of pieces to the puzzle in these graphs. So we put all the pieces together and we can graph a polynomial function. So, you know, you might want to review or make a note card. We're going to go through these piece by piece, and then at the end, we're going to kind of put it together. Okay, but I wanted to talk about 2 more things. The wording. So they say blank is a 0 of multiplicity blank. So in our example that we have right here, we would say -3 is the 0 and is a 0 of multiplicity 1. The next one, this one, 2 is a 0 of multiplicity 2. Now, the fact that those are the same number just is, you know, an oddity. And then the last one here, we would say -1 is the 0, and it has a multiplicity of 3. I just want you to be familiar with the wording and what we're talking about. One thing is the 0. You identify the 0, then you identify the multiplicity of that 0. Okay? One more thing. If you add up the multiplicities, I'll lose my thing, the sum of the multiplicities. So if I took the multiplicities from my example, 1 plus 2 plus 3, that equals 6. That means my polynomial is degree 6. Means there's at most 5 turning points, and I'd have to have, you know, x to the 6th for my degree. You know, the first term, the leading term. Okay,